I'll take 100 slow-burning episodes to the grave just to witness the glory of everything From gave us with its latest episode. I mean, episode 7 was everything this show is revered for. Boyd ringing the bell during the last hour of daylight. The monsters spreading across town to haunt the residents. Kenny being trapped in one of the most stressful sequences the show has ever delivered. This was peak From, because it wasn't just dynamic, it also came with two very important revelations that put a lot of things into perspective. First, Sophia, also known as the Man in Yellow, is clearly becoming one of the most dangerous forces in the town. She seems to be pulling strings, manipulating people, and staying one step ahead of everyone else. But the greatest revelation of the episode was about Fatima and Smiley. My heart was pretty much beating out of my body when Smiley went in for Kenny. But right at that moment, Fatima finally proved why her connection to Smiley matters. She somehow sensed what was happening, screamed out, and disrupted Smiley just long enough for Kenny to escape. Does that mean Fatima can now control Smiley? Not completely, not yet. But something is definitely there. So let's find out as we discuss the anatomy of the Smiley creature in Fromville.
You want to test me, huh?
How did Smiley become a humanoid monster in the first place? As you know, Smiley is one of the mysterious creatures that haunt the inhabitants of the town in From. These monsters kill pretty much anyone they can get their hands on. And Smiley is one of the most memorable among them because of that permanently creepy grin. The Smiley creature takes the appearance of a young man dressed in 1950s style clothing. He walks slowly, smiles constantly, and looks almost friendly until the moment he drops the act. Despite that human appearance, he is one of the most dangerous and brutal creatures in the town. According to the revelations across the show, Smiley and the rest of the monsters may have once been human beings. Season 3 strongly suggested that the monsters were tied to the original townspeople who sacrificed their children in exchange for immortality. That deal gave them eternal life, but in the most horrifying way possible. They did not become blessed immortals, they became cursed predators. Now, given that the Man in Yellow appears to be one of the main architects behind the Nightmare of Fromville, it's tempting to believe that he may be the malevolent force behind the deal. Maybe he was the one who offered immortality to the original residents. Maybe he was the one who demanded the sacrifice of the children. Maybe he gave them exactly what they asked for, but twisted it into a punishment. That part is still theory, but it fits the show's logic. The original inhabitants may have wanted to live forever, but the bargain horribly backfired. Instead of eternal human life, they were transformed into flesh-mutilating humanoid monsters, bound to hunt through Fromville every night. And Smiley is the perfect example of what that cursed immortality looks like. What are the creatures in Fromville like? All the creatures in this nightmarish township, including Smiley, are terrifying predators who seem to take pleasure in toying with their victims. They don't simply kill people quickly, they stalk them, talk to them, trick them, and often torture them psychologically before physically tearing them apart. Their attacks are usually brutal. They often eviscerate their victims and remove internal organs, although the exact reason they do this is still unknown. One possibility is that the bodies are part of a ritual pattern. Another theory is that the organs are connected to whatever feeds the power behind the town. But for now, the show has not given us a complete explanation. Before the discovery of the talismans, the creatures would shriek all night, likely to terrify people hiding in the darkness. After the talismans were found, their behavior changed. Instead of screaming, they became quieter and more manipulative. They began whispering, smiling, calling people by name, and trying to convince victims to open doors or windows. That's one of the scariest things about them. They don't just hunt like animals, they understand people. Even when a creature appears alone, there are usually others nearby. waiting just out of sight. They almost never run. They walk slowly, calmly and confidently toward their prey. The only major exception we've seen is Smiley running toward Miranda near the faraway bottle tree. That detail is important because it suggests the creatures may be able to move faster when they want to. They simply choose not to most of the time. Why? Because walking slowly gives their victims hope. It makes people think they still have time. It lets fear build. It also doesn't help that the creatures have inexplicable knowledge of the people in the town. They seem to know names, emotional weaknesses, personal histories, and exactly what to say to break someone down. They're highly intelligent, capable of long-term planning, strategy, manipulation, and psychological warfare. The best example of this is Jasmine seducing Kevin into letting her inside Colony House. That wasn't a random attack, that was grooming, patience, and planning. Despite their monstrous nature, the creatures also show strangely human behavior. They mimic ordinary people. They collect belongings. They rest in the tunnels. They seem curious about human beings. That makes them even creepier because they are not mindless beasts. They're something worse. They're human enough to understand cruelty. Becoming a monster might have been a curse. A lot of what we know about Fromville comes from theories. Not just our theories, but the theories of the characters struggling to stay alive inside that hellhole. That's the beauty of the show, right? Every answer feels like a doorway into 3 more nightmares. Through Fatima's pregnancy storyline and the Season 3 revelations, we know the monsters are connected to the original townspeople who made an immortality bargain and sacrificed their children. But instead of remaining human, that deal stripped away their humanity and bound them to the force that granted it. That means becoming a monster may not have been the reward. It may have been the fine print. The creatures don't age. Their bodies seem preserved. Their clothing often reflects an older era, especially the 1950s styling we see on many of them. They're immortal, but only in a cursed form. They can't live in the daylight like normal people. They hide underground during the day. They hunt at night. They're trapped inside the rules of the town just like everyone else, only from the other side. It's safe to assume they probably didn't know this would be the outcome. They may have believed they were buying eternal life. Instead, they became eternal monsters. That also explains why Tabitha and Jade matter so much. The show has revealed that they are connected to earlier versions of themselves, including Miranda and Christopher, and that they keep returning to the town across cycles because of the children. Their original versions may have refused the ritual, tried to stop it, or somehow disrupted the outcome. If that's true, then the curse didn't just affect the monsters, it created a loop. The monsters became immortal predators. Tabitha and Jade became reincarnating witnesses. The children remained trapped. The town became a machine that keeps repeating its own sin. There's also an interesting biblical layer in Sophia's story about Achan and Jericho. In that story, one person's forbidden act brings punishment on an entire community. If the man in yellow sees himself as a godlike figure, then maybe the monsters are not just his servants, maybe they are also his punishment. They got immortality, but lost everything that made immortality worth having. Smiley's smile is a weapon. Smiley's smile is not just creepy, it's part of the hunt. The creatures look and sound like normal humans, but something is always slightly off. Their clothes resemble ordinary social roles: nurses, waitresses, mechanics, cheerleaders, jocks, librarians, and friendly strangers. They weaponize familiarity. That's the trick. They're not trying to look like monsters at first, they're trying to look like people you might trust for one fatal second. When they attack, they reveal their grotesque true forms: jagged teeth, monstrous faces, claws, and inhuman hunger. But before that transformation, they rely on manipulation. They speak softly. They smile. They pretend. They use emotional pressure. For Smiley, the smile is his signature tool. He looks like he knows something you don't. He looks amused by your fear. He looks calm because he knows the ending before you do. A great example comes from Season 2, when the creatures hunt the bus passengers caught outside. During the chaos, Smiley enters the bus and sits in the driver's seat. He pretends to drive and even turns on the lights. When he notices two people hiding behind the seats, he walks towards them calmly. The elderly couple hiding there initially thinks he's just another person. For a split second, relief hits them. But then Smiley tells them they picked a bad spot, and that's when the nightmare becomes clear. That moment captures everything terrifying about him. He doesn't need to rush. He doesn't need to roar. He just smiles, speaks politely, and waits for the victim to understand they're already dead. These creatures can be temporarily killed. Smiley didn't stand out only because of his horrifying smile. He also stood out because he was the first creature Boyd actually managed to kill, or at least temporarily kill. Before Season 2, we knew the creatures were functionally immortal and almost impossible to harm. Gunshots didn't stop them. Slashing and stabbing barely mattered. They didn't seem to feel pain in any normal human way. For a long time, there was no known way to kill them. Then Boyd returned from the dungeon beneath the ruins after encountering Martin, the emaciated man chained there for years. Martin infected Boyd with the mysterious bloodworms, creating one of the strangest and most important biological mysteries in the series. At first, no one could see the worms crawling under Boyd's skin. Eventually, Christy and Kenny saw them too. Around the same time, Ellis was losing blood after being stabbed by Dale, and Boyd could not safely give him blood because his own blood was infected. Kenny volunteered to take the worms from Boyd through the same ritualistic phrase Martin used, but Boyd chose another plan. He ran out of the clinic and called out to the creatures. Smiley approached him, still grinning. Boyd cut his own palm, then cut Smiley's throat. The wound did nothing at first. Smiley kept smiling, but then Boyd pressed his bleeding hand against Smiley's open throat and said, "My blood is your blood now." At first, Smiley seemed to treat it like a game, but then Boyd felt the worms leave his body, and Smiley began to writhe in pain. His human appearance fell away, revealing his true monster face. The other creatures gathered around him, confused and curious, while Boyd ran back to the clinic. Soon after, Smiley collapsed lifelessly on the road. The next morning, Boyd and Kenny stared at the body, wondering if he was truly dead. Given that they later dissected and burned him, they had every reason to believe they'd achieved something impossible. But as we know now, killing a creature is not the same as ending it forever. Christie's autopsy found a strange yellow fluid. After Smiley's death, Boyd and Christie brought his body into the clinic for an autopsy, hoping to find some clue that could help them understand the creatures. What Christie discovered was deeply unsettling. Smiley's insides were mostly human-like, but they were shriveled, dried out, and almost completely devoid of normal bodily fluids. He looked human on the outside and had recognizable organs inside, but everything about him was wrong. Then Christie found a yellowish fluid, which she identified as bile. That detail has bothered fans ever since. Why would a dried-out monster body still contain bile? Why was that the only meaningful fluid left inside him? Was it just a biological clue, or something more symbolic? And here's where we move into theory territory. The show has repeatedly connected Fromville's horror to fear, suffering, ritual, and emotional breakdown. The man in yellow seems to enjoy watching people turn on each other. He appears to feed on collapse, despair, and the town tearing itself apart. We've also seen disturbing imagery involving organs, teeth, bodies, and ritualistic remains. So one possible theory is that bile matters because it's connected to fear, stress, and the body's emotional state. Historically, bile was also tied to ideas of temperament and emotional imbalance. If the creatures terrorize people before killing them, maybe the fear itself changes what the town wants from the body. Maybe the monsters don't just kill because they're hungry, maybe they prepare victims. Maybe psychological torture makes the offering more useful to whatever power controls the town. That could explain why the creatures play with people instead of killing them quickly. Fear, panic, betrayal, and hopelessness may be part of the harvest. Now, to be clear, this is still a theory. The show hasn't confirmed that the man in yellow feeds on bile, liver, or fear in a direct Pennywise-style way, but the bile detail, the organ mutilation, and the repeated focus on psychological torture all feel connected. There's also another possibility. If Smiley had bile, then maybe the creatures still have some internal emotional or biological reaction left inside them. Maybe they can feel pain. Maybe they can feel fear. Maybe the curse didn't remove everything human from them. That would make Smiley's death even more interesting, because when the bloodworms infected him, he didn't just die, he panicked. He suffered. For once, the smiling monster looked afraid, and that may be the most important anatomical clue of all.
It's coming.
How did Smiley resurrect? Remember the good news that Fatima and Ellis thought was their sign of hope in a place like Fromville? Well, that good news was actually Smiley. At first, Fatima's pregnancy seemed like a miracle. In a town defined by death, the idea of new life felt impossible and beautiful. But then things got disturbing. She stopped eating normally. She craved rotten vegetables and even dirt. Despite showing signs of pregnancy, the ultrasound revealed nothing in her uterus. Then Fatima's condition worsened. She accidentally killed Tilly, an old woman who was only trying to stop her from eating garbage. Ellis hid her in a shack to protect her, but things spiraled further when Elgin kidnapped her and took her to the root cellar. Elgin believed the thing inside Fatima was salvation. She believed it was everything bad. Then he fed her his blood, and her pregnancy accelerated. The ghostly kimono woman appeared and seemed to guide the birth. Fatima eventually gave birth to a fleshy, sack-like pod. The kimono woman carried it into the underground tunnels. When Boyd followed, he witnessed the impossible. The pod grew, split open, and Smiley emerged reborn. That changed the rules of the entire show. Boyd had not permanently killed Smiley. He had only removed him from the board temporarily. The immortality bargain still held. If one of these creatures dies, the town can apparently bring it back through some horrifying reproductive or ritual process. That makes Fatima's pregnancy one of the darkest twists in the series. She didn't give birth to a child, she became the vessel for the return of a monster. And because of that, she may now be connected to him in a way no one else is. Are these creatures affected by daylight? To be very honest, we know the creatures don't come out during daylight. But whether daylight actually harms them is still uncertain. When Boyd killed Smiley, his body was left outside until morning. When Boyd, Christy, Marielle, and Kenny found the body at sunrise, the sunlight didn't burn it, it didn't turn it to ash, it didn't visibly damage it. That matters. If these creatures were like vampires, daylight should have done something. But Smiley's corpse remained intact. That suggests daylight may not destroy them automatically. So why do they hide during the day? Well, there are a few possibilities. Maybe daylight affects them only while they're alive. Maybe it weakens them. Maybe it puts them into a dormant state. Or maybe the rule is not biological at all. Maybe they are commanded to remain underground during the day because they are guarding something. That last theory has become more interesting because of the tunnels. When Victor and Tabitha entered the tunnels beneath the town, they found the monsters sleeping there during the day. The monsters weren't simply gone, they were hidden underground, resting among objects, tunnels, and strange secrets. The man in yellow repeatedly warned against digging and entering places beneath the town. That suggests the tunnels are important. They may contain answers the town doesn't want exposed. They may also be connected to the bones of the Ankui children and whatever ritual keeps this entire nightmare alive. If Jade is right that the bones matter, then the monsters may be spending the day protecting the most important evidence in Fromville. That would also explain why they remain underground even if daylight doesn't physically destroy them. They're not just hiding, They are guarding. And if Boyd and Jade prepare to enter the tunnels to retrieve the bones, I wouldn't be shocked if the creatures eventually break their usual rules and come out during the day. Imagine the panic if the townspeople discover that daylight was never as safe as they believed. That would be pure from cruelty. Can Fatima control Smiley? Now we come to the craziest plot development of the latest episode. The final stretch of episode 7 had my heart pounding. Boyd wanted to test one of the settlement totems on the creatures to see if it could kill them or give the residents an advantage before entering the tunnels. Kenny and Dallas tried to convince Boyd not to do it himself, especially because his Parkinson's symptoms could get him killed if they flared up at the wrong time. Eventually, Kenny volunteered. As night fell, Kenny took one of the totems and stabbed one of the creatures. At first, the creature pretended to be affected. For a second, it looked like the plan might have worked. Then the truth hit. It had done nothing. Even worse, Sophia already knew about the plan and had seemingly alerted the creatures. The monsters blocked Kenny's escape routes, cutting him off from the buildings he was supposed to run to if things went wrong. With nowhere else to go, Kenny ran for the bus. But Smiley followed him inside and climbed after him onto the roof. Then Smiley started mocking Kenny about killing his father. Just as he was about to transform and attack, the show cut to Fatima, who could somehow see what was happening. She saw Smiley's perspective. She felt the moment. She screamed for him to stop, and Smiley stopped. Only for a second, but that second was enough. Kenny threw him off the bus and escaped long enough to get behind a talisman-protected barrier. So, can Fatima control Smiley? The safest answer is not fully, but she can affect him. She seems to share some kind of psychic, biological, or spiritual bond with him because of the rebirth. She carried him. She gave birth to him. The town used her body to bring him back. That may have connected them in a way neither of them fully understands. And this could become a game changer. If Fatima can see through Smiley, then she might be able to spy on the creatures. If she can interrupt them, then she might be able to protect people at crucial moments. If she can eventually influence him more directly, then the residents may finally have a weapon the creatures did not expect. But there is also a darker side. If Fatima can feel Smiley, maybe Smiley can feel her too. If the connection works both ways, then the monsters or the man in yellow could use Smiley to reach into Fatima's mind. So this could make her powerful, but also extremely vulnerable. It also makes her a loose end. If Sophia or the man in yellow realizes Fatima can interfere with Smiley, she becomes a major target. The town doesn't tolerate people who learn too much or gain too much power. Fatima may have just become one of the most important people in Fromville. The big question now is whether she can learn to use this connection before the town uses it against her. Final thoughts. Well, that brings us to the end of this breakdown. Smiley's not just a creepy, grinning monster anymore. He is proof that the creatures were once human, proof that their immortality can resurrect them, proof that their bodies still contain strange biological clues, and now proof that Fatima may have a direct connection to the monsters. He is a predator, a curse, a resurrected sacrifice, and maybe even a weapon that can be turned back against the town. But this is From, so every advantage comes with a punishment. If Fatima really can disrupt Smiley, then Boyd and the others may finally have a chance to enter the tunnels and find the bones of the Ankui children. But if that connection works both ways, then Fatima may be in more danger than ever. So what are your bizarre theories about Smiley's new symbiotic relationship with Fatima? Let us know in the comment box below.